All right, everyone. So today we're going to be talking about China fulfillment versus US local fulfillment. And we're actually going to go through actually some real numbers to show you the real differences. And the reason why I want to talk about this is because, especially recently, especially last year, I think it was probably had to do with some of the impacts of COVID disruptions in the supply chain. There's been this strong idea that you need to move to US fulfillment in order to actually scale a brand. And there are a lot of really great reasons to move to US fulfillment. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's not a good idea. And actually, by the way, it's something that we're actually planning for EcommOps as well in the near future. So keep an eye on that. But I wanted to let everyone know that just moving to like US local fulfillment. So we're talking about US specifically. In the future, we'll probably talk about EU local fulfillment, which has different implications as well. But just moving to US local fulfillment is not going to somehow magically solve all your issues. It's not going to somehow make your brand more scalable. And you'll see through this module that there's going to be a lot of reasons why it's actually quite the opposite as well. So we're going to cover first a brief history of China fulfillment. We're going to talk about the actual benefits of China fulfillment, and we're going to run some real numbers. I mean, this is not just me being biased. We're going to run some actual numbers as well to show you the differences and help you make your own decision as well. And how are you going to best leverage China fulfillment in the best way possible? All right, so I'm going to get started. And again, anyone who has questions, just post it in the group, and I'll make sure to answer them either as we go through or at the end. All right, so first, let's talk about a history of China fulfillment, directly shipping from China. I want to be very clear on something. All right, China fulfillment doesn't mean drop shipping. I think this is like a misconception that a lot of folks have. China fulfillment like literally just means shipping from China. It could mean drop shipping, but that's not exactly equal to what it is. If you're working with a supplier to control your supply chain, plan your inventory, improve your products, especially if you're working with a factory already, then it's no longer traditional drop shipping. It's just not what it is. What I mean by traditional drop shipping, obviously, is the most standard. The most standard is if you drop ship from AliExpress, for example, you're just purchasing from AliExpress and drop shipping to your customers without controlling anything in the supply chain. So let's get that clear first. Now, that being said, the rise of efficient China shipping really grew with the drop shipping boom. Yunexpress, 4PX, these top China couriers, they really actually matured as like really efficient shipping options around 2018 or so, conveniently right when EcommOps was first started. So Yunexpress, for example, it was founded in 2014. And that was in response to like the big boom in China to global e-commerce, which at first was stuff like AliExpress. And at first it wasn't actually just drop shipping, obviously. But as folks got wind of how efficient AliExpress is, that fueled the big boom of drop shipping that started around five-ish, 7 years ago. And that's when Yunexpress's volume actually just really grew as well to kind of grow with this volume. Now, however, currently, actually, in the last couple of years, the majority of Yunexpress's volume is actually not drop shipping. So, guess what segment actually makes up the largest percentage of Yunexpress's business? Amazon, FBM. All right. Actually, the biggest segment of Yunexpress's business is actually fulfilling for Amazon sellers that are based in China. And they really don't do that much pure drop shipping, even when they're working with kind of suppliers like us. A lot of us aren't really kind of in the traditional drop shipping anymore. And there's also a reason why Yunexpress is not offered as a standard option on AliExpress, for example, because they're just not really focusing on this drop shipping business. Yunexpress is focusing on efficient shipping from China. All right, so when we started working with drop shipping stores years ago, first, we were definitely more like drop shipping agents, but our goal has always been to help drop shippers really level up from this idea of traditional drop shipping and actually build a actual supply chain where there is visibility into the supply chain, the factories, plan stock, and also work to improve products and customize products as well. Actually, currently we don't actually have any active clients that work in the traditional drop shipping model, no stock planning at all, no control of the product. It's really fine for testing, by the way. And we do help some bigger clients with some testing in this kind of more drop shipping model, but it's definitely not scalable. And that's not what a lot of currently, what we do is just more around fulfillment. So roughly 60% of our current volume are clients who send stock to us and just use us for fulfillment. I mean, like purely as a 3PL, I'm sure most of you guys heard of the term 3PL, third-party logistics. Usually I hear people think about it in terms of like ShipBob, for example, as a US 3PL. But just because that there's a fulfillment center based in China doesn't actually mean that it's also not a 3PL as well. So basically we act as purely as a China 3PL. And actually 40% of our volume, the rest of it, we do help source or plan their supply chains, at least to some extent. But essentially my point is that in the last couple years, we do like millions of packages per year now. It's pure China fulfillment, right? 60% is pure fulfillment, and then 40% is a mix of fulfillment and helping with the supply chain. And this is something that we've realized throughout the years, the huge benefit of China fulfillment. And this is why we really committed in this direction. And we feel like this is really the current big thing, I guess, in logistics, to either replace or even or just supplement local US fulfillment, and in terms of risk, flexibility, and even in many cases cost as well. So we're in some numbers later as well. All right, so some benefits, and again, we'll crunch some numbers too. All right, so the too long didn't read is that it's less risk, better cash flow in terms of inventory. It's more flexible, easier to scale. It can actually be cheaper, and we'll run through some numbers. And honestly, it's fast enough, and you can ship internationally profitably. Anyone who's tried to ship from a US 3PL to like the UK, for example, it's not good. It's too expensive and it's too slow. All right. Now let's get into some of the details. So this first one is one of the biggest factors, and maybe I think the most important, is that it really reduces hugely the lead time from your factory to your fulfillment center. And lead time, and I said this many times before, it's a cost. It should be considered as at least as a driver of cost, because you basically have two choices when you have a long lead time. You have to overstock to avoid selling out, which is obviously more risk and more upfront cash, or you don't stock enough and you risk selling out, which is opportunity cost, right? You could be selling, but you cannot sell. And that is a cost as well. And this is really important to remember. So let's actually do some simple math here, all right? So let's assume that you have a product that's $3, just the product COGS, all right? So without shipping, there's pure product COGS from the factory. Let's assume you do 100 orders per day, all right? And obviously your factory usually needs to produce it, but I don't want to complicate things. Let's just assume that the factory just like has stock and there's no factory lead time, and it's only the lead time of actually getting it to your fulfillment center. And let's assume that we're comparing a US 3PL in LA versus a 3PL in China. So if you're using sea freight, which is going to be the cheapest option, sea freight right now, you should be budgeting 60 days, sometimes more if you're using a more economy option. And when you plan for inventory, if you only have one fulfillment option, you have to plan for more inventory than you actually need. Because again, to this point, right? If you want a consistent running business, you probably want to choose to overstock. You don't want to sell out and not be able to actually fulfill. You're going to get either not be able to fulfill and have much longer shipping times, which defeats the purpose of US shipping in the first place, or you just can't sell at all, which is just a shame because an opportunity cost, because you could be making revenue the entire time. Now, assuming that we want to overstock, usually you might want to overstock by like maybe 30% or so. So we'll just kind of use that assumption. So 60 days, you might want to plan for 90 days of inventory. All right. 90 times 100 orders per day times 90 days times $3 per unit. That's $20,000 in $27,000 in inventory risk to plan for enough so that you can account for this lead time. And again, this is not even accounting for production lead time, which might be 10 days, or might be 2 weeks, right? But to simplify things, but that's $27,000 in inventory risk, just accounting the sea freight lead time. All right. Now, what if you use air freight? All right. Air freight from China to a US 3PL, you should assume it's going to take around 20 days or so. All right. So you probably want to plan for maybe 30 days of inventory to be safe. Same kind of math, 30 times 100 times 3, that's $9,000 in inventory risk. All right. Local shipping to a 3PL in China. Basically, anywhere in China, shipping to pretty much anywhere else in China it takes as fast as 24 hours. If it's very close, it can take maybe 3 to 4 days or so, but let's just say it's going to be 3 days, right? So it's going to take 3 days to get to a 3PL in China. And then you probably want to plan for maybe 5 days worth of inventory, right? 5 times 100 times $3, that's $1,500 in inventory risk. All right. Just look at that massive difference in terms of how much inventory that you actually have to plan for in terms of just being able to have enough inventory to make sure that you don't sell out and therefore have to stop your sales or have to have slower shipping. All right. So this is like, just such a huge difference. And this is one of the biggest factors on why having China fulfillment, at least as an option, is going to be a huge impact on your ability to scale up, sell consistently, and really minimize your risk in terms of the cash that you put up front. And if you think about it, I mean, if you like, if you do higher numbers, your product is more expensive. Obviously, this just goes up and up and up. Now, some of you might be thinking, hey, like freight doesn't take that long. All right. Like, some supplier quoted me, oh, DHL is going to take like 3 to 5 days, maybe, or like a week, look, to that, I say, try yourself before you make assumptions. All right. Like sea freight, you might have people saying that, oh, it might just take like 25 to like 45 days or so. All right. Most of the time when they say things like that, it's quoted as the time on the water or the time on the air. All right. So when people say that DHL is 3 to 5 days right now, people literally mean that once the goods get to Hong Kong, DHL receives those goods, then it's going to take 3 to 5 days in the air to go to the destination country. And then it's going to have to go through customs, right? So that means that even if you use something like DHL, it's going to take some time to actually get to Hong Kong because, I mean, your factory is obviously not based in Hong Kong. It's most likely based in China. And especially these days with COVID delays, there's delays of up to a week using DHL before it even gets on a plane. And then the 3 to 5 days starts. And then there is very often, if you're doing a bulk kind of purchase, bulk kind of shipment, you might have to go through customs clearing. It might get held as well. And as you go to the less reliable, cheaper forms of air freight and sea freight, that time and the buffer you need gets longer and longer. We've had air freight actually that, use UPS take up to 30 days sometimes because the client got unlucky and their products were held in customs and there were COVID delays. So it would be held in customs for like 10 days. All right. And then similar thing with sea freight. I mean, sea freight these days, like a container ship could be stuck outside a port for 2 weeks at a time because they're so congested and it's just not getting through. So these are pretty reasonable numbers. So if anyone's kind of quoting you faster times than this, you should just assume that they're probably just quoting like the best case scenario and the time on the water. All right. Okay. So now as kind of like a related point to this is shorter lead times means a lot more flexibility in scaling as well. So let's do some math again. Let's again assume $3 product COGS, 100 orders per day, no factory production lead time for simplicity. Now let's assume you use the air freight option. All right, you prepare 3,000 units of stock. Your ads crush it. All right, you scale to 500 units per day or more, right? And by the way, this happens all the time. Like if you're already kind of doing 100 orders per day and like your ads start crushing it, like your ROAS is amazing and you just start scaling up, like this happens all the time with our clients. That's 6 days of inventory. Like your 3,000 units of stock just runs out in 6 days. So what do you do, right? Another air shipment is going to take a 20 plus days. All right. If you stop, then you risk your campaign optimization. You miss out a ton of money and potential sales. Or actually, you say, okay, your ROAS is amazing and you're ready to scale, but you can't because you want to be responsible and you don't want to run out of inventory. And you kind of have a similar problem. You still have to wait 20 plus days before you can actually scale to the level that you actually want to be and your ads allow you to. But in the meantime, you can restock in China in 3 days and ramp up your purchasing so you can support like 500 days, 1,000 unit. Like, by the way, these are units, right? 500 units per day, thousands of units per day without really much headache. Obviously, you still got to plan your production. You still got to plan your inventory restocking schedule. But when your restocking takes 3 days from your factory, you have so much more flexibility to avoid running out of stock and to plan inventory in a hand for scaling just within days or maybe a week without taking all of this inventory risk. All right. So, this, I want to really drive this home. This is like really the biggest reason why China fulfillment adds so much flexibility. And by the way, if you take this to extreme, this is really why, dropshipping actually kind of just really started working really well, because technically speaking, dropshipping, you don't have to worry about inventory or lead times at all. All right. Now let's do some fun math. All right. So I wanted to actually show you guys real numbers because I didn't want to just tell you guys China fulfillment is better and take my word for it. All right. And obviously there's some numbers here, but I want to show you that actually the costs are actually very competitive as well. So I'm going to open this sheet as well. And again, this sheet is going to be in the document. So if you're looking for these notes, comment notes below and we'll send it to you. So just a few quick caveats here is that we basically compared, let me actually open this up first. We compared 3 different sample products. Now, Webby's not going to give away what the products are, but these are real examples of very common products, e-commerce products. These are the real weights in grams and ounces. These are the real or pretty close to real actual product COGS values for these 3 types of products. Some other assumptions. We compared China fulfillment with using ShipBob. All right, ShipBob, everyone I'm sure knows ShipBob. They are the biggest. And I think that even though a lot of people might have had somewhat not great experiences with them, I still do think that working with a larger company like ShipBob is probably the best choice if you're actually starting with US fulfillment at first. There's a lot of random 3PLs there, but you probably want to work with someone who is bigger, more experienced, or someone you trust. Like if you know a guy who runs a 3PL that you trust, maybe you can use them. But generally, ShipBob is a good option if you're starting out. So I put this link here. You can actually just scroll down here and you can actually just use their calculator. All right. This is where I got their numbers from. This is directly from ShipBob's calculator. So you can actually check these numbers yourself. And then we also have some EcommOps pricing. This is standard fulfillment pricing, fulfilling from our warehouse in Shenzhen. Now, note this is actually our standard pricing. If you have higher volume, this can be somewhat negotiated depending on your situation. And one important thing, by the way, is that all prices are valid as of February 20th, 2022. Prices change all the time. So just keep this in mind. If you watch this like a few months later and prices change, it's because they just do change all the time. And then freight cost assumes 1,000 units. So they're going to be LCL, which is going to be less than container load shipments. All right. So this means that it's going to be like you're not booking a full container, right? If you book a full container, then your economics are going to be a little bit different. It's probably going to be a little bit cheaper. But for the sake of this argument, I'm assuming that you're not booking full containers at a time. All right, now let's actually run through the numbers. So let's start with shipping to the US. All right, so shipping to the US, let me just clarify this a bit from ShipBob. All right, so this is shipping US to US ShipBob. And again, these are just numbers that we just plugged into this calculator. All right, so now, for those who don't know US shipping, there usually is a range depending on the zone, depending on where you're shipping from and where you're shipping it to. And this is the ShipBob standard cost. So for a 30-gram product, they're ranging 538 to 591. And actually it's the same for a 140 gram product as well. It's just how ShipBob prices things. So basically it's the same price for these kinds of weight ranges. And then for this 550 grams, so more than a pound product, this is 959 to 1249. And just for ease of comparisons, I just use an average rate for some of these calculations. And the shipping time, we're going to assume 4 to 12 calendar days. Now, let me actually just bring up one point here is that why 4 to 12 days, right? You know, you might be thinking like, why is it not like 2 days? Why is it not like 3 to 5 days, right? You're shipping from the US, it should be faster. So first of all, 2-day shipping is incredibly expensive. You can get it, but 2-day shipping, unless you're Amazon with warehouses literally everywhere, 2-day shipping is not reasonable. It's going to be much more expensive, and maybe you can charge your customers for it as an express shipping, right? So like 2-day shipping is unreasonable for just normal margins. And then 3 to 5 day shipping, that's like if you use like pure USPS first class, for example. And even then, like it's more like 3 to 5 business days. So it's probably more like 3 to 7 calendar days. Now, ShipBob standard, or if you ship Monk, for example, what these standard costs are, these aren't even actually USPS costs. If you use USPS, it's actually going to be more expensive than this. ShipBob uses a mix of USPS and UPS and FedEx economy options and mix it together, and it's not great, right? So we've had a lot of clients tell us that they started using ShipBob and they're really getting at like, you know, 4 to 12 calendar days or so, you know, so this is actually a realistic range. And that's why, like, you know, we're comparing it here. And obviously, like, there are faster options, but they're going to be a lot more expensive. So for the sake of it, we're just going to compare standard options. All right. Now, what a lot of, you know, when you think about US fulfillment, a lot of times people like sometimes forget or like too late realize that you got to get stuff to the US first. You got to add in the freight costs, right? So this is where we actually, these are the current quotes for if you were going to send, you know, 1,000 units by different freight options to the US to LA. Now, this is going to be a pretty standard range of costs that if you, for example, get from, you know, like if you're working Alibaba or your factory and they ship it for you to the US. All right. So here we have, there's 2 air options. There's kind of more of an economy air option, and there's more of a air DHL, right? And you see all the prices here, and there's 2 options for sea as well. There's more of the economy option, and there's more of the fastest boat from Shenzhen into LA. And obviously they have different cost implications as well. All right, customs. This is something that a lot of folks learn about, unfortunately, a little bit too late. And this is, you got, when you're shipping in bulk, look, if you're shipping like 10 units, like you don't have to worry about customs, right? But if you're shipping like 1,000 units, if you're shipping something that's going to be worth like, you know, more than $1,000, I think the cutoff is more than $800 worth. Actually, you're going to have to worry about customs. Now, customs and tariffs, they're all over the place. It depends on the product. Some are actually tariff free. Some have very high tariffs. So I'm just going to put a very average rate of 25%. All right, it's a reasonable range, but again, depending on the product is going to be different. All right, so these are going to be the customs percentages based on the different COGS values that we have here. All right, so therefore we have all of these total costs. All right, so each of these options is going to be shipping with ShipBob standard, this average cost, plus depending on the freight option you use, the cost for each freight option, plus the customs rate for that product. All right, so here is a total cost depending on different options, and here's the shipping time. You know, here's the shipping time to the US. Let me just clarify this. This is for the freight. So it takes this much time to get to the US, and then the US shipping is going to be for the 12 days for ShipBob standard. All right. Now, so here is US shipping directly from China. Here's just our standard prices for Yunexpress. So we have 3 lines. We have the express line, we have the regular line, we have the ordinary line. And right now we're looking at roughly 5 to 10 days for the express line, 5 to 12 days for the regular line for Yunexpress, and 6 to 16 days for the ordinary line. Oh, and actually, when I talk about these prices, I feel a lot of times like people are like, Yunexpress is not that fast. If it's not that fast, by the way, it's probably because your supplier is not using the right way, or they're telling you that they're using express option, but they're using an ordinary option, or they're not based in the right place. And I'll show you some data actually later too, just prove it to you as well. But these are the dates, right? So if you see, if you use, well, obviously the express line 5 to 10 days, it's going to be somewhat better than actually even ShipBob standard shipping, right? Now, obviously express a little bit more expensive. Now, regular shipping, we're looking at 5 to 14 days right now on average. And yeah, you know what? Look here, we actually track all of our recent packages, and these are literally the number of days that it takes to the US. So this is not just me like trying to cherry pick stuff. These are the 10th percentile, 90th percentile, right? Express, 5.5 to 10.5 days. These are the numbers that, I think it's been a little bit slower recently. Oh, because this is actually from roughly around from Chinese New Year's, so normally speaking, this is more 10 days, but it's a half a day's difference. All right. So these are, look, so these are from actual data. All right. And then now let's do actually some price comparisons then. So let's actually just use this middle line. We're just going to use this regular line, 5 to 14 calendar days versus like 4 to 12 calendar days for ShipBob standard shipping, right? And don't forget, for ShipBob shipping, you got to include the freight time as well. So let's look at the cost differences. All right. So this is basically the regular line from China compared to each of these options, depending on what kind of freight option that you actually use. And actually, I was a little bit surprised. I was actually a little bit surprised at some of these numbers, because I was actually pretty sure that the air numbers, like China would actually come out pretty similar. But actually, if you look at this, so green means China is actually cheaper. All right. Like for all of the air options, it's cheaper across the board to ship from China. And on average, the shipping time is pretty similar, and you reduce all the freight time. All right. Like honestly, 5 to 12 days versus 4 to 12 days, it's not a notable difference. Oh, and someone asked a question, it's calendar days. These are all calendar days. These are not business days. All right. When you're talking about 5 to 14 days versus 4 to 12 days, literally you just say, hey, like 1 or 2 weeks, right? Like that's all you need to say, right? So these are like very, very similar enough, but look, it's cheaper, right? It's actually cheaper for both air options. And actually, as it gets heavier, it gets, kind of more like significantly cheaper as well. And you get all the benefits of much shorter lead times, right? And this is what actually also surprised me. For C, it's actually cheaper in many cases as well. I was actually surprised by this analysis, but I also realized, look, these are considering like you're not booking a container at a time. Like when you're actually using C, if you can book a container at a time, that's when you get the real savings. All right. So these, like, I am confident that these numbers will actually be cheaper, like shipping to the US if you're actually booking containers. All right. So just keep that in mind. It's not just like, C doesn't make sense at all. It is because these are kind of assuming like 1,000 units. So you're booking just a portion of a container as well. All right. Now, so one of the things I also realized is that if we look up here, we included this customs rate, right? So I was actually wondering, okay, well, how much of a difference is just because of the customs, right? So what if we just say we just don't add any customs at all, all right? Just 0%, all right? And this all changes, right? And even if you don't add customs, which you have to add, by the way, if you're scaling, even if you don't add customs or tariffs, a lot of these still come out ahead. A lot of these are still green, all right? So even if you don't have any customs rates, like, this is something that is just like, I mean, I was actually surprised at these numbers. Actually, I thought it'd be similar. I thought it'd be competitive, but I didn't actually realize it would be actually just cheaper like this. So, kind of surprised me as well, right? Now, so that's for the US. Now, again, the caveat is that this is like ShipBob standard, which is not the best option, right? But as you go up, like ship off 3 to 5 days, ship off 2 day gets ever more expensive. So we're not going to go through the exercise right now, but yes, they can give you fast in the US, but it's going to get much, much more expensive. All right, now another fun exercise. Let's check out some international. So we're not going to do like every country, obviously, but let's just say UK. All right, US to the UK, ship off standard cost international. All right, this is excluding freight, by the way. Like I'm just going to do this calculation without even calculating freight, without like, you even getting it to the US. You just somehow have stock in the US, right? This is ship off US to UK, $10.89, $10.98, $17. Shipping time, like weeks, like literally weeks. Like I ship stuff from Shipbog to like Europe before, and it's like it takes weeks and poor tracking and everything like that. And then these are the prices shipping directly from China to the UK. All right. Like I'm not even going to do the calculation because obviously this is much bigger, right? This is much larger. And again, this is not including freight. This is not including like you actually getting into the US somehow first. All right. And the UK actually is much faster as well. So yeah, so actually there is a question from Alexander. Yes, like he asked, right now we're comparing standard options for ShipBob in China. How does it change if we're only talking about express options? So I didn't want to like overcomplicate things by doing a ton of analysis. At some point in the next like couple weeks, maybe months, I do actually plan to build a working calculator that you can actually just that we can actually kind of just compare like different options, like express options, 2-day options. So that's something that we're actually working on. So we might actually do another webinar just on more detailed analysis then. But just a quick answer to that is that like it's going to be a lot more expensive, basically. Like something like, just from the top of my head, for something like this, let's say like let's just say like a 550 gram, like over a pound kind of product. Standard is going to be like $10 to $13 for ShipBob. If you're using 2-day, this is probably like $20, $25 or something like that. Potentially even more than that, actually, if you're using express option. All right. So yeah, that's something that we can do the analysis a little bit later. All right, so that's all the math there. Again, this is all in a spreadsheet, and it's all in this document as well. So if you need these notes, comment notes below. If you're watching through the course, the notes are going to be below anyways. All right, so anyways, so yeah, look, like the cost, like it's cheaper. It's actually cheaper from China if you're using these assumptions. All right, now those are just fulfillment costs. Now, ShipBob also has storage costs, warehousing costs, right? This really starts to add up depending on the size of your goods, how long you hold it for, right? And especially because if you're using US fulfillment, you're probably needing to hold weeks or months of inventory at a time. So this stuff really, really adds up. This is per pallet. I mean, a pallet is not that big. It doesn't hold that much product depending on what kind of product you have, right? So without even comparing these costs, like generally we, or like a lot of China fulfillment services, they don't really charge for inventory unless it's like longer. So, we might charge for inventory that turns in more than 90 days. Like if it's just stuck for more than 90 days, then we might charge for some storage costs, and it'd be cheaper than this at least. And part of the reason is because, look, I mean, space is a lot cheaper, and our clients don't even plan for that much stock anyways. I mean, if you're shipping from China, why do you need to plan for 3 months of stock? Like you don't actually need to. You could just plan for much lower amounts of stock. So we don't normally really charge storage for our warehouse. And I think a lot of other fulfillment centers in China, they either don't really charge for it within the first like 30 or 90 days, or when they charge for it, it's going to be really, really cheap. And then ShipBob also charges receiving costs. This is something that I was actually surprised by. Actually, when we were actually fulfilling our product Cody, the one that I went on Shark Tank with, we actually used ShipBob a couple of years ago, and it cost us like $140 to receive 2,000 units of Cody because it's based on an hourly basis. So you can imagine how all of this adds up as well on top of the warehousing costs. I mean, we don't really charge for receiving. I mean, to be quite honest, like labor is cheaper in China and there's no reason for us to charge it. All right. Now, you might be thinking, and I hear this a lot, like, look, Shipbot makes money, obviously, right? Like you can get cheaper if you're just like printing out USPS labels yourself. But like, that's not the right way to think about things if you're scaling, right? Like your time is money too. And like, you're never going to scale without hiring people, right? Like if you're fulfilling like 50, 100 orders per day yourself, like that's your entire day. Like that, like you're not doing anything else, right? So you're not doing marketing, you're not growing your business, and you're never going to like be consistent or scale without hiring people or getting more warehouse space. And my general rule of thumb, I mean, like we obviously have a lot of experience in terms of fulfillment and understanding our own costs and fulfillment costs. Like you should really estimate between anywhere between $1 to $5 worth of overhead per order running your own fulfillment, depending on the efficiency. Now, when I say $1 overhead or maybe a little bit less, like I'm talking about if you're a massive brand and you lease out a cheap warehouse and it's running at almost full capacity all the time. Like that's what I mean by like the most efficient option. Then you can estimate maybe like $1 of overhead, right? But honestly, if you're just kind of like, if you're renting a warehouse, if you're paying people and their capacity is not like 100% or even 80% utilized, you're gonna be like, if you really account for everything, you're like going to be like facing like $5, maybe even more on average overhead per order, right? Fulfillment is a very much economies of scale business. Like you need to hit scale, you need to hit efficiency for it to actually make sense. And that's why actually ShipBob is actually so huge right now. I mean, ShipBob, like they were funded by SoftBank. I think they're worth like $1 billion right now. There's a reason why they've been growing so fast is because people realize that they don't want to fulfill by themselves. They would rather pay someone to fulfill. All right. So don't assume that this isn't a way that you can save on costs. You might save on costs for your testing, but there's no way you can scale with this. And yes, shipping times are just fine. I mean, these times are fine, right? Like 1 to 2 week shipping. And especially if you can kind of more afford express shipping, this is like, 5 to 10 days. And actually, we can actually just really quickly look at these numbers, right? Actually, the express lines, like anything under 450 grams or a pound is actually not bad at all in terms of pricing. It's just over 450 grams. There's a price cliff. So anything that's a little bit heavier, you might not want to use express, right? But actually anything lighter, we have a lot of clients who actually have lighter products, 50 grams, 100 grams. They use express all the time, and it's way better than even actually shipping from ShipUp, using standard at least. And my point here is that, just constantly we get people like telling us like, hey, like, that's not right. Yunexpress is slower. Yunexpress is not that fast. Like, look, like I showed you guys the numbers earlier, like, if you're not getting these times, like, something is not right. Like your suppliers is not sending it out correctly. They're not based in the right location. All right. So now, how do you best leverage China fulfillment? So, first of all, part of what I want to do with this is to clear up this misconception that US fulfillment is strictly, like it's just clearly better than China fulfillment. It's not. I mean, maybe like 3 years ago, yes, but now it is definitely not. And if you're already fulfilling from China, like, and you have no real reason to move to US fulfillment, it's probably more headache than it's really worth. And again, like I'm not just saying this to be biased, because we actually do plan on opening our own US fulfillment services later this year, but we actually want to do it in a different way. Like we actually want to do it so that it's all integrated. So it's not like, so it adds more value as an integrated system as opposed to just a separate 3PL. So like my point in that is that I'm not dissing on US fulfillment. All right. Like I want to go through this. I want to go through these numbers to show you the real data, the real objective fact that US fulfillment is not necessarily 100% better. Now, there are going to be some really obvious benefits to fulfill from the US. If you really want 2-day, if you really want express as an option, like from the US, then obviously it's only possible. Like, look, I don't think it's ever going to be possible to have 2-day shipping from China. So if you really want it, if you really want to offer it as an option, then okay, yeah, then it definitely makes sense from the US. It's just going to be a lot more expensive, but maybe you get your customers to pay for it. So US fulfillment is obviously very useful if you want to continue fulfilling during stuff like Chinese New Year's, or in the last days prior to Christmas, you want to extend your shipping cutoffs as late as possible and maybe offer 2-day shipping, for example, to get in time for Christmas. So this is an obvious benefit to the US as well. And if you do have enough volume to book full containers, all right, so there's obviously a reason like massive brands use C. I mean, like stuff that goes to Walmart, for example, that has very low margins. They pretty much can only afford to use C, and they can only afford to use full containers to get the best costing possible. If you have enough volume to book full containers, then your sea freight costs are going to be cheaper. All right, it's going to be cheaper than these comparisons, and I can pretty much guarantee that actually. So if you can do that, then definitely it's a good option. But then you got to obviously face with you're faced with these longer lead times on sea, right? And then some products like very heavy, sensitive materials, like it just can't be shipped from China, and then the US is your only option. So obviously this is going to be something that you want to fulfill from the US. Now, one thing that I want everyone to know is that the decision doesn't have to be binary. It doesn't have to be either or. If you can actually do it, if you can actually do it correctly, a mix of options can actually work very well for you. And is actually a big reason why we're actually looking to get into US fulfillment as well. So we can actually offer that more efficient mix of options. All right. So if you have enough scale and cash flow, then I think this is probably going to be the most efficient mix. All right. So you occasionally send containers to sea. And I'm talking about full containers here, right? Occasional containers by sea to a US 3PL for the lower average cost. But remember that you don't want to risk too much here, because otherwise you're planning for like 90 days of inventory. There's a lot of costs. And if you don't sell out, then it's a big risk. So let's just say that your lead time is still 60 days, but maybe you just plan perfectly for 60 days, or maybe you plan for like 30 days or 45 days. So most of the time you get to achieve those lower average costs, but you generally just understock to reduce your risk and warehousing costs, right? If and when your US stock runs out, then just fulfill from China, right? I mean, you got to make sure your margins make sense, right? You can't base your margins based on these C costs, and then fulfilling from China is going to be a bit more expensive and you can't afford it, right? But when your US runs out, your US stock runs out, fulfill from China. And then you can wait for more US stock to arrive in weeks or a month, 2 months, whatever, right? And then fulfill from China to global, to worldwide, to really open up global markets. We literally have clients, by the way, who increase their sales by like 20, like 50%, like almost overnight. I mean, not exactly overnight, obviously, like you got to turn on the ad campaigns, you got to optimize, but we have clients who just like improve their sales by 20%, like without any localization, literally just adding more countries to their campaigns or just running international campaigns. And immediately they start selling profitably. That they couldn't do it because all their stock was stuck in the US. And then obviously, like once you actually start optimizing for international markets, you might be kind of used to just selling to US markets now, but international is starting to work. Then you hire a team of translators and you start translating your landing pages and you localize payment methods. Use Klarna for Germany, for example. That's where you can actually get like this huge boost in sales, like without really doing that much, to be honest. The same product and maybe the same marketing message. And just imagine boosting your sales by that much just by being able to market internationally, right? Oh yeah, and I actually said this before, this is what we're kind of looking for in the second half of this year. All right, so if you do this though, and we actually have a lot of clients who actually manage this themselves. And that's the reason why we're starting to plan for this, because we want to help them manage it for them, because doing this yourself does get a little bit complicated sometimes in terms of projections. You're working with a lot of different players who don't necessarily communicate with each other the best. So, but if you do something like this, make sure you have a logical way of separating out who fulfills what. All right. So a common example that we see is that US 3PL only fulfills US orders, maybe Canada. Canada is not bad for the US. And then China only fulfills global orders. We also see people setting different shipping methods for different fulfillment. right? So for example, we have some clients who have some limited stock in the US, but they only use it to fulfill if someone purchases express shipping or 2-day shipping, and standard shipping, they just ship from China. And then we have a system to make sure we identify that and just ignore these express orders. And if their stock runs out in the US, they just have their team member, have like their VA, whatever, just say, hey, stock is out. Please please start fulfillment from order number XXX, and then we'll take over. And then the opposite, when you have stock in the US again, they say, hey, we have stock in the US again, please pause fulfillment starting from order number, whatever. Right. So this is a really great way to take advantage of this more mixed model where you can get a lower average cost, but still get a lot of the benefits of the flexibility and lower risk of China fulfillment, and obviously global shipping as well. All right. So some additional tips as well on working with China fulfillment services. So first of all, they got to be based in Shenzhen. Actually, let me just show you guys a map of China. I realize that, I keep saying Shenzhen, and I realize that not everyone actually knows, what I'm talking about in terms of these locations. So sorry about that. So let me actually show you nice little Google Maps here. So this is a map of China. This is the Shenzhen area. All right. So Shenzhen it's actually literally right next to Hong Kong. Shenzhen to Hong Kong is like maybe a 40-minute drive or something like that. The reason why you want your fulfillment center to be based in Shenzhen is because by far the fastest shipping lines are all coming out of Hong Kong, are all going out of Hong Kong. Hong Kong has a unique status where it doesn't actually have, like, Hong Kong airport doesn't have all of the restrictions of Chinese airports, and just generally speaking, just planes coming from Hong Kong going to Hong Kong are much more efficient. For example, we've actually seen UK express packages get to customers in 2.5 days, right? Like 2.5 days, literally, because Shenzhen to Hong Kong takes it takes an hour, but let's say half a day. Hong Kong to Heathrow takes let's just say half a day or so. And then Heathrow to everywhere else in the UK is within a day, right? So it can be as fast as 2.5 days. Now everywhere in China, the other reason why Shenzhen is that actually partly because of the availability of fast freight lines, this is where all the major couriers are based. Yunexpress, 4PX, UBI, they're all based in Shenzhen, and they're all specialized and optimized for Shenzhen as well. Whereas everyone in China, so another very common place for suppliers is going to be in the Shanghai area because a lot of factories here. It's fine. You're just not going to get the best fulfillment options. So if it's all the same, work with someone in Shenzhen, basically. All right. So, and then if you're working with China fulfillment, by the way, so keep in mind, this is not dropshipping anymore. So your supplier is not going to necessarily know your product before you send it to them. We've had issues with this. Don't assume everything is shippable. Not everything is shippable, right? Make sure that you actually tell your fulfillment center what the product is, maybe ship them a sample, and so they can tell you if there's any issues with it as well. All right, that's very, very important. Make sure they have a real warehouse. So years ago, we were just a dropshipping agent. All right. We didn't actually need that much space. We basically just had a large office space, and we just had goods all over the place. And that was because when you do dropshipping, you don't have to hold that much stock. You hold a day as a stock at a time. But fulfillment services takes a lot more space. So, you got to make sure they have a real warehouse, because if you're going to send them 10,000 units and they don't have space, well, actually, I don't know what's going to happen. Actually, they're going to try to delay the shipment probably. Make sure they have an efficient, quick, and accurate receiving process as well. Actually, this is actually, one of the things that I've heard is a big complaint about something like ShipBob. It seems like they take a long time to process new inventory. I'm not sure why actually, but ShipBob processes inventory in 3 days, which seems very slow to me. I don't know why, but anyways, if you're working with a China fulfillment service, make sure that they can process inventory very quickly. They should be able to process inventory basically in the same day, or at least just one business day. Because if your fulfillment center takes 3 days to process inventory, and it might have errors as well, it kind of just starts to offset the benefit of more flexible lead times, right? If your lead time is 3 days plus 3 days of processing, it's just it's literally double, right? And yeah, you want to make sure that they have an efficient way of doing so, and make sure that like your fulfillment center also has very clear options on the different shipping options provided and implications on that as well. What we actually found from a lot of, especially dropshipping agents, but also some fulfillment services as well, is that they say they use Yunexpress. Like I don't know what that means, because Yunexpress has like 3 lines, right? And they don't say anything else about it, right? Yunexpress has 3 lines, and they cost differently, and they have different timing as well. They have different implications as well. There's also other lines that we use for liquids, for example. There's other lines that we use for more sensitive products. They're a little bit slower, a little bit more expensive, but make sure that like make sure that you actually understand the options and the cost and the timing as well. And yeah, so I talked about this example, and actually another example from ShipOps standard. Actually, this is what I talked about before. A lot of people don't realize this until they actually start using ShipOps, that all the quotes they're given is not USPS, which is actually fine. USPS first class is fine. It's not bad at all. But ShipOps standard is a mix of USPS, FedEx Smart Post, and UPS SurePost. These are terrible. Like, these are just like economy services that people think are not bad because they have the FedEx and UPS brands. But anyone who's used them before, like, they're so terrible, because these, I should actually create some content actually about these services. They basically, they take advantage of like route optimization. A lot of these packages, what they do is they start as FedEx, but then they end up as USPS anyways, because it's cheaper for them. So there's like a handoff process, and it's just like, this is what makes it so that ShipOps standard is not good. This is what makes ShipOps standard take up to 2 weeks. ShipOps gives you an option that, hey, if you just want to use USPS, you can actually choose that option, but it's more expensive, right? So that's where they get you. All right, so let me actually, all right, so I'm gonna just end the recording here for the course module and for the YouTube channel as well. And then I'll stay around for a little bit longer to answer any questions as well. So